Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I think 99% of the people in here are obviously my survey of criminal justice students, but to those who are not, if you don't know me, I am Professor Tiffany Tillman. I'm an instructor here in the Law and Justice Department, and I'm also the program coordinator of Liberal Studies. First and foremost, I want to thank our panelists for joining us today and giving of your time to come and talk with us, and also to all of you who are in attendance. On behalf of the Law and Justice Department, I just want to say that we are really excited about this collaboration with Africana Studies. It's an event that Dr. Rose and I have been trying to get in the works for a little while now, and we couldn't be happier that you all were able to join us today. I know everyone obviously is here today to hear from our panelists and not from me, so I'm going to keep my comments brief. But I did just kind of want to share a little background on kind of our inspiration for this event. The goal of the event is just to highlight the benefits of kind of diversifying your academic areas of interest during your time here at Rowan. I know specifically in my survey of criminal justice class, we kind of talked about, majors or minors that pair well with studying law and justice. And today we really want to highlight the fact that our Africana Studies program is a great program here, a great major, a minor, to pair with law and justice. We really believe that kind of interdisciplinary study is important in the job market today, but specifically in the criminal justice field, making sure that our future criminal justice professionals have kind of a broader understanding of our historical context, cultural context, and basically how that will make you all better prepared to enter the criminal justice system, whether that's in law enforcement. I know we have a lot of future attorneys in here, students who've expressed interest in going to law school, some students who've expressed interest in working in corrections, no matter kind of what avenue of the criminal justice system you are interested in working in. I think really having an interdisciplinary approach to prepare you to be in the field is a great advantage, and we just wanted to kind of highlight that. And you all received the kind of mock program guides if you do decide to double major or major minor in law and justice, Africana Studies, kind of what your coursework might look like, and to also highlight some of the benefits of merging these two disciplines. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Chanel Rose, who is the program coordinator of the Africana Studies program, to give you a little more information and to introduce our panel.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tillman. And thank you again, Dr. Tillman, for allowing us to have this event during your class. She's been very gracious. And I'm really excited about listening to what the panelists have to share today. So I'm not going to say a lot beyond introducing them, but I just want to add to what she said, that I'm sure many of you are aware of many of the changes that have been happening in the country over the past several years, especially following the police murder of George Floyd. And there's been a lot of focus within corrections, within law enforcement, within the criminal justice system, looking at how we understand race, how we understand the experiences of those who are most affected by some of these areas. And so we've seen that there's been a lot of focus on training, on anti-bias training, on really making sure that people who are in many of the fields that you plan to go into have some of that understanding. And we feel that Africana Studies can be one of the majors if you pair with, that can really prepare you as you go into whatever future career path you choose. So that being said, as I know my panelists will share a lot more insight than I did, but I'm going to read all of their bios. So if you would just be patient with me so that you know who's going to speak, and then they each will have 10 minutes to share their particular area of expertise and the benefits of the dual major, and then we'll open it up to questions. So Brandon Thomas, if we have here, holds a bachelor's degree in law and justice from Brandon Thomas holds a bachelor's degree in law and justice from Rowan University. He's currently pursuing a master's in leadership and administration at Wilmington University. He has been a police officer for the Willingboro Township Police Department since August of 2014. Officer Thomas is currently assigned to the Community Engagement Unit as a school resource officer. He is also a field training officer, a firearms instructor, and an operator on the Special Weapons and Tactics team. Brandon truly believes in volunteerism. He currently serves as a board member for Rowan's Alumni Association Board of Directors. He's also a volunteer for Rowan University's Law Enforcement and Community Collaborative Initiative, and Officer Thomas works diligently to advance the law enforcement profession and strengthen the relationship between the community and the police. Kia M. Pratt earned her master's degree in public administration from Troy University and a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Clark Atlanta University. She is currently a supervisory intelligence research specialist for the Drug Enforcement Administration in Camden, New Jersey. Mrs. Pratt began her law enforcement career in 2001 as an intelligence analyst for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. In 2004, she joined the National Security Agency as a special agent and later became a contractor for the Central Intelligence Agency, but left the agency after receiving a job offer from the DEA. She has held several positions at DEA's headquarters in Arlington, Virginia, Chicago, Atlanta. She's also served as a faculty member at the National Intelligence University, where she was the DEA chair. Over her DEA career, Mrs. Pratt has supported several multi-jurisdiction and international drug and money laundering cases, managed multi-agency intelligence groups, authored agency policies, and managed intelligence programs. Paris M. Pratt earned his bachelor's degree in management science and a minor in Africana studies from Keene University in New Jersey. He has over 25 years of law enforcement experience and currently serves as an assistant special agent in charge for the Drug Enforcement Administration in Philadelphia's division. He's a native of Camden, New Jersey, and he began his law enforcement career as a patrol officer with the Delaware River and Bay Authority in Newcastle, Delaware. He transferred to the Salem County Prosecutor's Office in Salem, New Jersey to work as a criminal investigator. In January 2002, Mr. Pratt entered his service with DEA. He has worked in various offices, including Long Island, New York, Birmingham, Alabama, Pittsburgh, and Bogota, Colombia. Mr. Pratt has experience in leading hundreds of drug and money laundering investigations, to include members of Al-Qaeda, managing human resources, and serving as an inspector. And last but not least, we have Professor Stanley Yeldell, who is an associate professor who received his JD from Howard University School of Law in the city of Washington, D.C. He has 31 years of experience in law and justice studies with
48.
Oh, 48, okay, well, you 48 years, excuse me, I stand corrected, of experience in law and justice studies with specific emphasis in the field of victimology and a diverse background in the following areas: criminal law, business law, consumer law, forensic law, and torts. He is the program coordinator for the Criminal Justice Internship Program, the Department Academic Advisor, the founder of the Victim Awareness Organization, and the advisor to the departmental student organization Gamma Chi. His ongoing research includes the Atlantic City Gun Tracing Project and the Comparative Victimization Study with the Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice. So without further ado, I'm going to have Mr. Pratt begin, followed by Mrs. Kia Pratt, and then Brandon, and then we will end with Professor Yeldell. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for having us. As my bio read, my name is Paris Pratt. I'm a DEA agent. Well, actually, my title is Assistant Special Agent in Charge, which that means I cover several enforcement groups in Philadelphia. My story started in Camden, New Jersey, and at that time I really wasn't interested in law enforcement. But once I got to college, I majored in management science. At the time, I never really was interested in law enforcement, so I didn't focus on criminal justice. But when I was a junior or senior, I took Africana studies because I felt in high school we didn't focus enough on history, or if we did, we can't really separate American history from Africana studies. So when I got to college, I focused on Africana studies. I knew I couldn't really get a job, or I didn't believe I could, so I didn't really try and take all of my classes in Africana studies. But I became a junior, I started focusing on management. Junior, senior year, I started going to career fairs, and I met a New Jersey state trooper at one of the career fairs. And I guess when I was in college, I was kind of silly, and I figured, like, well, everyone knows what a a New Jersey trooper does. So let me go up and talk to the guy because he was standing by himself and appeared lonely. So after talking to him for a while, I became interested in law enforcement. And he introduced me to new thoughts. And that's why we really can't shut down any conversations, because you can gain knowledge from everyone or anyone. And at that point, that trooper really affected me. And that right after that, I started looking at law enforcement. But not really disconnecting from the Africana studies, because I understand that it helped me understand more of who I am and other people, because if we're really going to get into a job of service like law enforcement, we have to understand people, right? And I think we have a problem in our society right now because everyone's so law enforcement heavy without understanding other people and other people's culture. When I was in high school, I took German, right? That was my first test of understanding something outside of my box. College, obviously, Africana studies. Once I got into law enforcement, and again, I grew up in Camden, New Jersey, but I wasn't really understanding or 100% comfortable with crime or crime activity, even though I, grew up in a city where there, crime was visible at times. So it took me a while to get comfortable with how to speak to people and understand that, even if a person is nervous, don't mean they're lying. It's just they might be nervous speaking to someone in law enforcement because of different cultural, concerns. So Africana studies, kind of like Spanish. I learned Spanish because I worked in Bogota, Colombia. And if Spanish is important to the Latin culture, Africana studies is important to all the other cultures. Because when I was taking Africana studies classes, what kind of fascinated me wasn't just the history, but it was the art. And when I realized that old art, if you're talking about Egyptian art, and some people really didn't understand that Egyptians were Africans, but if we're speaking about that and looking at the language or messages that they wrote, it was telling a story. And that kind of interests me. And if talking to paintings and what was happening in different eras and times, like in, any other culture, Africans spoke a language through their art. And that really fascinated me. And stuff still that I keep close to today. And I think the combinations between learning German, living in Bogota, Colombia for 3 years, Africana studies, and all the other places I've worked in the U.S. kind of combines help me be a better agent, be a better person, and add to the service that I can give to the various communities that I've worked in throughout the years. But hopefully, I won't take up too much time, but hopefully at the end we can speak more about what I've mentioned, my background, or how I can help someone try to navigate two majors per se.
Thank you. At first, I want to say thank you for inviting us. If you're curious, yes, we are married. And that's a whole story within itself. But I wanted to say in the beginning that although we both are employed with DEA, we're not representing DEA today. We're representing ourselves, and our thoughts are our own. And I just wanted to get that out since it's being recorded. But so with me, my path, you heard my bio, it's very long and it seems like a winding road. But growing up, I'm originally from Michigan and I grew up in Atlanta. I grew up in the 80s during the crack epidemic. And like Paris, I saw crime all around me. And I was like, either I'm going to be a victim of this or I'm going to be a part of solving the problem. And for me, I felt that crime was inevitable. People are going to get arrested. People that look like me are going to be arrested. But what I wanted to do is make sure that there were people like me at the table when decisions were being made. And so I believe that a major like Africana studies or criminal justice and whatever aspect that you go into it is very important, because what you want to make sure is that you're representing the community that you come from. And I know that some people are like, oh no, that's bias or whatever, but it's not, because what you need are different voices and different perspectives in a room. Because I am not a male, I can't speak to the male perspective, I can't shine a light on different things that they're going through. We need males in the room. We need women in the room. We need different cultures, different backgrounds. And I think that this is the perfect time to enter law enforcement or criminal justice, corrections, law. My brother's a lawyer. We talk about different aspects of crime and law, but you're in the perfect time. And I don't know what history will write this, point in time, but we're looking at evaluating our juvenile laws, our criminal codes, the way we're looking at our bond and correction system. A lot of the juvenile codes that we are implementing today, they were written in the 60s. So back in the 60s, you were talking about truancy and, smoking cigarettes. You can't apply those laws to individuals who are out here shooting at Wawas. They just don't apply. And so you see a revolving door of juveniles being released to parents because of the fact that we're using outdated laws. So it's important that culturally we know the history of policing in America, where it comes from, even though there are difficult conversations to have, that we look at that. Us being in drug law enforcement, there is a lot of cultural nuances to what we're doing and how we're navigating in communities. But like Paris said, we are public servants first and foremost. And whether you're paid by a private sector employer or taxpayer dollars, you have to look at you are serving individuals. And what you will be entrusted with, and no matter what aspect of criminal justice you go in, you'll have the ability to affect someone's freedom, their civil liberties, their life. And you want to take that into consideration when you go out and make decisions. So when I was looking at this flyer, one thing that stood out to me as what I do, I'm an intelligence analyst. So I work hand in hand with the special agents. The special agents are the guys and girls that are making the arrests, they're kicking in the doors, but I'm the person behind the scenes making the connections. I'm the brains behind the operation. What does this small piece of information mean in the bigger picture? Identifying targets, assets, trends, locations, where to go. And as an analyst, you can go anywhere. Not like I'm recruiting, but the skills that you have, the ability to make decisions, being able to communicate and writing and briefing, having deductive reasoning skills, all of that is transferable, and no matter what career you go into. And having a degree in Africana studies, if you have that ability to do that deep dive research, expanding your thoughts into different things and going into it with an open mind. You may think if you are, of African descent that I got this would be easy, but I'm sure you'll be exposed to things that you have no idea. You said about the art. I know as far as my background and my education, it's very focused on the Americas and what happened here. So being exposed to Africa, the culture, the continent, and the whole diaspora will open your mind to then have an impact on what you're doing locally. So you already read my bio, but I will say, since you guys are freshmen, when I was a freshman, I just knew I wanted to be an FBI agent. Like, I knew it from the time I was 12. I watched Silence of the Lamb. I was like, I'm going to be like her. I just knew it. And I went through college with that mindset. Like, I had internships. I was just, building a resume, but it was all to lead me to the FBI. And it wasn't until I actually got into the workforce after 9/11 that, at that time it was a push for interagency collaboration. So I was able to work, I was a state intel analyst, but I was able to work with federal, state, and local partners. I was exposed to the, mass variety of the different agencies and different jobs. And that's when I really honed in. I had a similar experience of meeting someone, having a conversation, and them telling me what they did, what an intel analyst did. And at first I was like, I'm not qualified to do that. Like, I just graduated. And they're like, no, but your skill set, you can do this. And, and just think about it. And so I say that to say to you, right now you may think that you know, entering freshman year that this is what you want to do, but open yourself to the possibilities of something else, of the universe putting something else in your path that you may not expect, but it might be the best thing that ever happens to you. Because with what I've done, I've been able to travel the world. I've been able to teach. I've been able to build units, and I never thought that that's what I would do. I really thought I was going to kick in doors and be some profiler, and that's not what God had in store for me. So with that, I'll pass
Thank you.
it. Mhm.
Thank you. Brandon.
So first and foremost, thank you for being here. And can we just give a round of applause, because they are doing some tremendous things. I'm sitting here and I'm in shock. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Some awesome things. So my name is Brandon Thomas, as Ms. Chanel mentioned. I graduated from Rowan University in 2014. I did not see myself becoming a police officer. That was not my path. I actually came to Rowan for engineering and realized that calc was not for me. But it's all good though, because she said, diversifying and being open to what the world has to offer, and it's many different lanes that you can take. So when I was at Rowan, I was involved heavy. That's how I know Dr. Yeldell. I was involved in the Law and Justice Society and a few other different things on campus. I was an RA, and that really kind of directed how I wanted to do things. For me, it was I wanted to help people, but how do I do that, right? So I took a juvenile justice class, and that kind of led me on the path to get out of calc, and kind of led me on the path to law and justice. Still did not know what I want to do as an officer. You probably know Sindel Harris. So Sindel Harris, one of my close friends, she was an Africana studies major, and she would always tell me,
Who owns her own bookstore now?
yes, she's doing amazing, yes. But she would always tell me, take some Africana studies class, right? Diversify your portfolio. And I think that's one of the most important things that I would tell you. Diversify your portfolio, and especially in the job market, you really want to make sure that you are putting your best self forward, right? There is a lot of competition, right? So how do we do that, right? We take on some different classes, stepping out of the realm a little bit, and learning about other things outside of what we're normally used to. So the African Studies major, I think that puts us in a good space. Another thing for me, now I'm a field training officer. So one of the things that I often see when people come out of the academy, that's what I do. So if somebody comes out of the academy, I'm the person that trains them on the job training for 6 months. So the first thing I explain to them is that community, right? So you're going to be working and dealing with people in the community. I don't care what the community makeup is, because at the end of the day, there's a business, or there's a school, or someone that does not look like you, or someone that does not talk like you, and we need to understand what that is like, right? The next thing I explain to them that the world is like that big crayon box, right? The crayon box of 100 crayons. We can't just pull one crayon box out and expect that person to be able to know and understand what everybody feeling, how to deal with different cultures, etc. So I think that the goal to that is to educate ourselves, right? Do we know the backstory? I just had a conversation with a young man the other day. Do we know the backstory of why this young man is deciding to say, for lack of better terms, forget the police, right? Do we know that history and that makeup of where that comes from? So taking classes in the African Studies major, I just saw minority crime and community relations that stuck out to me, because you possibly will be learning the history of why there's that disconnect, right? Why there is this rebel at times, or and as you do know that, you now can say, okay, cool, this is what I can do to fix it. So I've challenged myself to step in some of those spaces and be that person that kind of educates. I'm glad that there's actually a program now and people don't have to just sit there and listen to me, but kind of educates and provide that backstory, that history of why different cultures may not get along with the police, or may not, necessarily like the government, et cetera. So the second thing I add in there is understanding that history plays an important role, and it's good it's good to be able to apply that to what you want to do in the law and justice space. Law and justice space is huge. You can be a lawyer, you can be FBI, DEA, but you also have victimology, you also have domestic violence, right? Understanding different cultures. Walking as a patrol officer, I may go into a domestic and have to understand that just because a person is if I go to try to speak to a young lady in a Muslim household, maybe that's not the setup, right? But I need to be educated to know what that looks like, right? So okay, I need to speak to the male first because this is the religion, right? Mm-hmm. But that relates to so many different things, whether it's Hispanic culture, whether it's African culture, whether it's Jewish culture. We need to be aware of that, and I think that the African Studies program allows us to kind of get both sides of that, of what that looks like. So I'm interested to answering any questions, and again, I thank you guys for allowing me to be here, and I'll pass it off to Dr. Yeldell.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, I really have to look out and see how diverse student population right now at Rowan University. I came here in 1974, and I remember the first day that I was getting ready to enter my office, I was told that I couldn't enter my office. And I said, why? They said, because we know we don't have any blacks working in the Law Justice Department, so you can't go in there. So the chairman of the department, he said, he came out, the young lady's name was Ellie. He said, Ellie, I hired Stan over the weekend, and I told everybody I was going to do it, and everybody agreed to it. But they didn't know that I was black. Because I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, from time to time, some people don't realize the last name Yeldell is a black person, you know? So, but also what I want to emphasize is that I try and teach my students to think outside the box. You know, we've heard, you know, law enforcement and corrections and so forth, but there's so many other opportunities out there that you certainly can take advantage of. Now, like for instance, did you realize the United States Agriculture Department has a graduate school, and they offer courses in diversity in this particular area, and they're in Washington, D.C. And did you also realize the Agriculture Department received their budget, their funding, before anybody else received their funding? And otherwise, you know, you hear the argument over and over regarding the budget. You know, we got to pass the budget. Agriculture gets their pass right away with no problem at all. So what I'm saying to you, Larry, the U.S. Agriculture Department is another opportunity that you can take advantage of. Another one I think is fantastic, probably the best kept secret, is the NBA. You probably say, well, Yeldell, how does NBA relate to this? You know how it relates? Let me go back. The NBA has a summer internship, and they pay $500 a week, okay? That's a lot of money for a summer internship. I had 2 students who completed an internship there. They were actually surprised. Okay, so Yeldell, you need to connect this. What I want to connect is the NBA has a problem with domestic violence. And when you look at the majority of the basketball players in the NBA, the composition is who? It's black, it's diversity. They need individuals of your particular background that can go in there. Another particular area is the United States Foreign Service Officer. I was almost recruited in 1977 by the State Department, but I said, no, I think my job, my calling is right here at Rowan University. Also, the pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical companies also are looking for students who have an Africana studies background, or can go in, analyze, and not only that, interpret data and so forth. And also not only that, but what about the United States Civil Rights Commission? Now, I placed students there. Africana studies certainly would be very helpful. Then also you have this state, New Jersey State Civil Rights Division. I'm just laying out to you that there's so many other areas that you can take advantage of. Like for instance, there's a great deal of research that's needed for faith-based ministries. and also dealing with charitable organizations. So what I'm saying is it's all connected, ladies and gentlemen. Also, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. I'm here because of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. I'll tell you how. 1968, I was arrested in Maryland, and because I was demonstrating at Bowie State University. Agnew happened to be the governor at that particular time. He says, lock them up right away. So it was 300 students from Bowie State. The question came up is, do we want to get arrested? And so the NAACP Legal Defense Fund was tracking us and said, go ahead. This is an excellent case of selective discrimination. They're only going to arrest the black students. They're not going to arrest the white students. And so with that in mind, so we were arrested. So before we arrested, I asked the question, who's going to get us out? Who's going to get us out? And of course, individuals in law enforcement understand what ROR means, released on your own recognizance. And they negotiated, and we were released. But it was the same day Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968. It was April the 4th. I will never forget that day. That always sticks in my mind. Also at the same time, subsequently in September, October, our case came up. And the judge said this case is this is a case dealing with selective discrimination as far as law enforcement, and the case was dismissed. Well, let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to do a follow-up study on that. The follow-up study is this. What happened to the 300 students who graduated, 300 students who were arrested at Bowie State University? There needs to be a follow-up on that. Where'd they go? What are they doing? So, as a matter of fact, I got to go back to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund because they represented us and get the names and addresses of the students who were arrested. And then if I can't get that, just the name, then go back to Bowie State University and say, well, these students, can I obtain the names and addresses of these particular graduates and so forth? Because I want to do a follow-up study. Where are they? What's going on here? And also there's some other important area, like in the area of the NAACP. Not only the Legal Defense Fund, but they have an office, they have a council up in Mount Laurel. And they deal with a lot of the diversity cases and cases dealing with discrimination, deal with cases dealing with the area enforcement. And I like my colleague when she wrote as far as the layout dealing with Floyd, that office deal with so many cases in that particular area. Also, Price Waterhouse. You say, well, how does Price Waterhouse would like to have the students who have Africana study? Because they want individuals from diverse background. They have 34 locations around the country, ladies and gentlemen. So please don't sit there and think that, well, look, Africana studies really, it doesn't relate. Yes, it does. Everything relates. And I like what my colleague said about the art. The art is so important. Are you familiar, ladies and gentlemen, dealing with the black Wall Street? And have you ever heard the Black Wall Street? And I have that painting in my house. Yeah, that took place in Tulsa, Oklahoma. A complete community, very enriched black entrepreneur was just about wiped out. But I was fortunate to meet a couple of individuals who was related to those particular individuals. Everything is related. And also, I'm proud of my colleague here because he was with the student patrol at Rowan University. It is the only student organization on this campus, and I'm sure you've been seeing the emails that's been sent out wanting students to participate. That student patrol program at Rowan University is the most distinguished program in the state of New Jersey out of 48 colleges and universities in the state of New Jersey. He's a graduate of that program, and he is making he's making a major contribution. Also, some other particular areas is in the area dealing with the civil service worker, also the social worker. And what I like what he said was when you go into a home and you go into a home in domestic violence, and if you don't know the protocol, if you don't know the lay of the land, how to deal with the Muslim or individuals from different ethnic backgrounds, you're going to have a problem. I learned that a long time ago, and I will say this, although it's not my bio, but I went to India. I went to India, and one of the first things that was informed to me was that when you go to India, do not take your left hand and shake and people from India's hand. And I said, why not? You know why? Does anyone have any idea why you don't shake their left hand? Yes.
It's the hand that you used to.
Yeah, that's right. And if you do that, you will embarrass yourself, ladies and gentlemen. And so what I'm saying is that, everything is all connected. So what I'm saying to you right now, I mean, there are other programs that or opportunity that you certainly can take advantage of. And Kia has. I'm like, when she's at the DEA office, when she steps with authority, ladies and gentlemen. And I think you really need to understand that and appreciate what she's doing, you know. And I'm proud of Paris. What Paris is not saying in so many words, he runs Philadelphia, ladies. He runs Philadelphia. Do you understand that as a DEA agent? You know? And he's a specialist, and so this is so important. And let me, before I stop, also it's not in my bio, but also I've written 3 textbooks. One is victimology, and the second one, I see some of my victimology students are in the class. Number 2 is the criminal justice internship. It's at the fourth edition. Also, I started out with a criminal law, just a basic information textbook, ladies and gentlemen. So let me stop right there, because I could just keep going on and on and on and on and on.
And for Q&A, I'm sure you'll have questions.
Very much.
So thank you guys so much. So I do want to say, and you've all touched on this, and for students, so the Africana Studies program, students who get a major or minor get to learn about the experience of Africans, African Americans, people of the African diaspora throughout the Americas, right? Latin America, South America, the Caribbean. So they're learning about the history, the contributions, the experiences, the challenges of people of African descent throughout the globe. And so you've touched on some of the points about why it's important for any student who's going into law and justice to diversify their portfolio, to know about other cultures and other backgrounds. And I'm thinking about within the context of what's been happening in this country over the past several years. We've seen a lot of whether it's police departments or law enforcement agencies or criminal justice reform, we've seen trainings, we've seen discussions about becoming more aware of bias. We've seen all these things, and I wanted to see if you could maybe bring a connection between why is it important for students who would be learning about some of this in the classroom to be able to bring this into whatever area or profession, because on the level of what they're doing in these careers, you have people who are paying people to provide this extra training, right, and information. But the degree is something that actually prepares them for what they're going to go into, where now we see more of that training. So I wanted you to kind of make a connection between this is what we're seeing more of an awakening with now, but they can actually get some of this in the major.
I can speak to that. So I'm a recruiter for DEA, and one thing I think Brandon touched on is diversifying. So, you know, all of you guys are going to graduate with essentially the same degree if you don't diversify. And we get thousands, when I say thousands of applications, when there's a job announcement. And it's like looking at apples. Everybody's got the same degree, everybody had good grades or whatever. So what is going to set you apart? What do you already bring to the table that we don't have to train you on? So it's like, okay, this person already has, you know, cultural bias, or they already know about the history of human rights or whatever. So then that gives you a leg up. One thing Dr. Yeldell always pushes, and I hope that, you know, that you are thinking about it and doing it, is internships. Internships. Don't worry about if you're getting paid. If you're getting paid, that's awesome. But get the experience, because you want to set yourself apart. And that's what this whole discussion is about. Preparing you for a job market that is going to be very competitive. It is very competitive. I know, you know, people like to say, oh, you know, the market is in favor of the applicant. It's really not. It is in favor of the employer, because we have so many people to choose from. The entry-level person really has a hard time getting in if you don't have any experience, because we can get somebody who's willing to take an entry-level position that has a law degree, you know? So it's like diversifying what you have and setting yourself apart. So then you don't have to have that bias training. You don't have to come in entry level, because it's like, okay, we can set them in this environment because they already know and they're already aware. That would set you apart.
Yeah.
And just to take it one step further, most companies have cultural issues. So the bias training, some people do it so they don't get sued, or some people do it just because it's built into the policy. But most companies know they have a problem before this training ever happens. So for me, going into law enforcement, to be honest with you, I didn't think some police officers that I encountered were fair and just. So for me, I thought in order to change something, you have to do it from the inside, right? Like with anything. And right now we're seeing it bubble up all over the place, whether it's law enforcement, the corporate world, the NFL, when Tua got the concussion and the doctor said it wasn't concussion, then it was a concussion. I mean, everyone that played the sport of football understood that it was a concussion when it first happened. It wasn't his back. But when you stand up and tell a lie in front of a microphone to, the nation, if someone in law enforcement stand up and tell a lie in front of the nation with a microphone, then a trust issue, we got an issue now. Trust is broken. So what you can do is educate yourself, equip yourself with the knowledge of Africana studies. So this bias training that people will need, you're already equipped. So the foundation of growth, the foundation of correctness, the foundation of maturity, whatever company y'all choose to work for, will be established, because whoever you become friends with, whoever you marry, whoever your kids are, will be hopefully equal, just people, and you'll grow them up that way. So what we're experiencing right now, it's not just in this country, it's everywhere. It's people just telling a lie for gain. And most of the gains are profit and money. People are really struggling right now with, power and money. That becomes an issue. But me being a Christian, it's listed in the Bible about money, so we understand what that is. And it's not new to anyone that believes. The Muslims think the same way with that, but we understand what that problem is. So with this bias training or any other training that the office say they do, which is good, but it's CYA or covering their butts on some instances, we have to understand that if we're equipped with living right internally, and this is a step in the right direction by you guys being here right now, and taking your time to listen to what we're saying, because hopefully it's planting the seed that you understand that we have to experience and learn and try more than what we have in the past. And obviously you guys being freshmen, this is a great foundation to learn something that you've never learned before.
Thank you. Right.
If I may add to that, so for me, as I grow in the space of law enforcement, I understand. So just yesterday, I was at an accreditation conference, right? What does accreditation have to do with law enforcement, right? And as I grow within the space, I am continuously understanding that everybody who works in the field of law enforcement doesn't carry a gun, right? There's some people that I come across and they are so interested, they never in their life want to carry a gun, right? However, there are so many different spaces of law enforcement where this would be beneficial right now, and that you can make money, make a good career out of, and having the law and justice and Africana studies is an amazing thing. It's Rowan, but I'll boost Rowan a little bit more. So in 2020, so one of the committees I sit on is the Law Enforcement Community Collaborative Initiative. So it was created with the mission to bring together Rowan community with local law enforcement professionals and addressing the strategic priorities. One, for development for law enforcement, two, to be committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, right? We talked about right here in regards to law and justice and African studies. That's essentially what you're learning, right? And you probably can couple it with the diversity, equity, inclusion. They have that program here. I can't think of what it's called right now. Yeah, the DEI certificate. But that puts you in that position where, no, maybe you don't want to carry a gun, or maybe you don't want to do this, but however, you're really good on the academia side, and you decide to say, hey, look, let me go and teach, right? Or let me go and be a contractor and go and teach a bias training. And you can utilize this in so many different ways that it can be beneficial, not just in the policing world. Maybe you want to go work at HUD, right? Housing, Urban, and Development, right? And work in that space. And now you're understanding where things kind of took a turn in history, and understanding the housing policies, et cetera. Because that's another space of law enforcement that I didn't learn until my wife works for Housing Urban Development HUD for the federal government, and they have a sector of law enforcement and dealing with evictions and things like that. So just don't think of it from I know when people talk about law enforcement, it's FBI, police, state trooper, DEA, ICE, things like that, but you can utilize it in so many other fields, so many other spaces of the law enforcement community that, no, you're not carrying a gun, or you're not necessarily just locking people up, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Professor Yeldell?
One of the things that before I leave, I'm going to put a challenge. I'm going to challenge everybody in here. Maybe you may not consider Africana Studies as a major, but I challenge you to take at least one course in Africana Study. That will open your eyes. You'll be a much better student. And to me, now, that's very important. And once again, I don't like to see students just think one way. Like it was stated, we live in a global world. Everything is connected. And what's so important is the bias. The bias, and it certainly exists. And I had to deal with it when I first came here, because I was the first black criminal justice professor in my department. But I managed to basically weather the storm. And do you realize all of those professors that were present, do you know where they are today? They're dead. They're dead. They dead. You understand that? But I managed to persevere. But I'm going to throw out a challenge. Take it. If you don't major, maybe you can minor in this particular area. Take a course. Open up your mind. Because there's so much. Open up your mind in so many ways. Because I've heard students say, well, I'm white and I will stay in my community. What happens if you marry a black person? What happens can you take that black person home? Because what is your parents going to say? And then I have some students say, I can't take him home because my parents will not accept him. I'll tell you a situation where one of my relatives, he married a white young lady, and her parents told her that you can't bring him home, and to us, you're dead. They ran into financial problems, and this relative and the young lady went to him and said, we can help you out. They said, before we will accept $1 from this black man, we will die. And guess what? The father died, but the mother had to wind up moving in with them.
So you're getting a soap opera, you're getting all this stuff. Thank you, Professor Yeldell. So I want to give students an opportunity to ask questions, right? I think, as Dr. Tillman said, some of you plan to go into law school, others are looking for other career paths. You have an opportunity now, right? You have a officer, you have a professor, you have specialists, right, who work in the DEA. You have a wealth of knowledge in this panel. So please take advantage of this time to ask questions that may be really important for you moving forward. Even though you're just freshmen, 4 years goes very quickly, and so you're really in a place where I'm sure there are other students in your position who wish that they had an opportunity, right, to be sitting where you are, to ask these kind of questions, to think about their career paths, and so you have the opportunity to do so. So I want to open up the floor to questions from any students in the audience. Yes. So can you tell me your name and your major or area? Well, it's law and justice, but what you're thinking of going into.
Okay, my name is Angelina Borshik. I would love to be an officer who becomes a homicide detective. That is my dream. Now, this is a question I kind of have for all of you. I would like to know how each of you retain information about your job, because now that I'm getting into this bachelor's degree that I want to learn more about, I notice it's hard to remember certain information because there's so much to each aspect of law enforcement, or like where you work at. So how do each of you retain information, because it's such like a vast knowledge of information, especially with this studies program and everything, there's so much information.
So for the sake of time, I'll have maybe two of you respond, and then we can go to another question.
Well, I'll say for me, Knowledge is power as far as being an agent. So to become a good agent, I only think 20% of us are really, really good at what we do, me being one of them. So I think like when I was a newer agent, I had to wait until who I thought were the good agents leave, and I had to read over their work, read over their reports. Because people that are good won't share knowledge, right? So I had to wait until people left to figure out how they did things. And I would jot everything down. Like after I met with someone, I would go back and I'll leave notes in my phone, I'll leave Post-it, napkins, I always keep a napkin in my hand. Kid kind of gets mad at me, I'll write stuff down on it. So anything that you can, like for me, I didn't remember everything, and I almost felt away when I'm around people that retained everything. So the way I kind of fought that was I'll jot down stuff and I'll study at home, or I'll put all my notes together and I'll write it down, like today's date, what I learned that day, and I'll just read the stuff over occasionally. That's how I got it.
I retain everything. Like I write everything, I keep everything, and I'm a hard paper person. Like I'm not a computer person. I have to have a hard copy, and I have to physically write it out, and that's how it helps me remember or recall it. So as things are always changing, I'm always referencing what happened in the past and keeping track of it. I keep notes of dates and things like that. And if you're going to be a homicide detective, that's a good trait to keep up with now, because you'll have to testify to things that you saw or recovered or whatever. So writing notes, keeping concise notes that you can actually read, and you know, so you're not going back like, and what did happen with that, and saving them. So coming up with your own method of like a not a case management system, but kind of like a filing system of your own, and maintaining that.
Another question? Yes. So your name?
No, I wanted to, you asked the question, I wanted to jump in.
Okay, yeah.
So you said, how do you retain? I keep a journal. Everything that I do every day, I keep a journal. I write it down. And it's so important, because later on you look at that journal, and maybe a year, 2 years, you say, oh yeah, so I did this, you know, and it helps me in many different ways. It only takes you 5 minutes to say, okay, what did I do today? You know, and you can write a half a paragraph or a couple sentences. Before you even know it, you're building. Not only you're building, but you're also reinforcing what you learned.
My name is Samantha. I am a psychology major with a minor in law and justice, and I'm currently seeking to go into graduate school to further my education in regard. I would love to study forensic psychology. And I'm curious, from your perspective, how could Africana studies aid in my journey to forensic psychology?
Well, like we kind of mentioned, or everyone had mentioned, if you're going to deal with people from Africa, or, you know, so if you always have to communicate with someone, right? Whether you're talking to people that your employer, you're being employed by, coworkers, so as a basic understanding of communication. It's kind of like, well, like I mentioned, speaking Spanish, if you're dealing with the Latin community. So it definitely helps broaden your palette to, in the diverse bias training that they were speaking about. So it just gives you a better umbrella, a better breadth of the people that are around you. And I think if this was an opportunity, like in college, to get this foundation, and while you're here, this is the best place to learn it, because on the outside, it's not really the same. Or you're having companies pay for it to come and visit, you know, because of an incident that happens, where that incident wouldn't happen if people were, you know, understanding of each other in the first place.
And I would just add to that within the major and the minor, you're exposed to courses like, you know, African American psychology, courses on, you know, sociology, minorities, courses on, you know, the history of African Americans since 1865, African American literature. So the minor is more African American history based, the major is more global, but you're getting to learn about, you know, cultural anthropology. I'm just listing the type of courses that you may take that I think would make you very well-rounded to enter into that field.
I'm assuming that you have to have some experience in regular psychology before you can venture into forensics. And I will say that a lot of people that I know who are looking for psychologists or wherever, they're always wanting to know, are they culturally aware? And sometimes they, assume that they're culturally aware based on, appearance. But if you were to have that on your background, it would be like, oh, okay, I can probably have a conversation with her about these things going on in my background because she will actually know what I'm talking about. And that would benefit you.
And buzzwords that you hear a lot from, and not just within law enforcement, but racial literacy, cultural literacy, right? I mean, not to say that taking the major or a couple of courses makes us just racial literacy experts, but do you have some of that awareness? Do you have some of that literacy? If you have no courses on any of the communities that you may potentially encounter into whatever career you're going into, versus someone who's applying for the same job who does have some of that background, as competitive as it is, it gives you an edge.
Just to add to that, one of the things that I'm not sure if Dean Jones was here when you guys were here, but one of the things that Dean Jones was one of my mentors when I was on campus. One of the things he said was to be able to understand that when you walk into a room, to be able to relate to anyone in that room, right? Whether that may be music, whether that may be language, whether that may be just by reading, a new different blog on a newspaper or something like that, right? And I think that's what the Africana Studies opens the door up to, that mentality to be able to understand other people that don't look like you or don't necessarily live in the same place or do some of the same things, right? I can sit up here and I can probably have a conversation with anybody in this room simply because of that, right? Because I took those steps to diversify myself. So I think that's one of the biggest things. But I deal with it on a daily basis where right now there are different populations in America that are increasingly growing more than others, right? And I think that probably one of the most annoying things to me is that, and I wish that I didn't really take, I'll say Spanish, right? I didn't take in high school I slept in Spanish class. In college I did not take the initiative. I wish I would have, because I have seen officers get called from 5-6 towns over because the town may not have a Spanish speaking officer, and they need to now assist, right, with interviews, with domestic violence cases, etc. So having that knowledge and being aware, and you being able to say, hey, look, this case, and you guys probably have it where you have certain cases where you need this person who speaks this language or understands this aspect, and you can't just put everybody in there, right? You need that person who is able to step in and say, hey, look, I got it, right? I know, and I think that's what it opens the door. It can open the door at some point.
But in the area of forensic psychology, what is interesting, I don't teach the course anymore, but I used to teach the course called Forensic Law. And in that course, there was subdivision in forensic psychology. And I'm not being egotistical, but I've saved at least 3 individuals' lives, because I had law enforcement in my class, and we were going over a pattern and was in a particular area. And the cultural pattern was the grandfather committed suicide because he had 3 DWIs and he didn't want to go to jail. Because back in the day, the statute said after 3 convictions, mandatory incarceration. So he committed suicide. Then here comes the son. The son, same thing. He committed suicide. So one of the students in the class says, I'm dealing with something very similar to that. And I say, you need to leave a room right now and go find that particular individual, because that person psychologically is right on the brink to commit suicide. He found that guy in the woods with a gun, getting ready, pointed at his head, and he was going to kill himself. And he stopped him. But what I'm saying, it's all connected, And I don't know if have you had the course in forensic law?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Because I used to teach the course, and I thought it was a wonderful course. And then you asked the question about the homicides. In the course, one of the requirements is that in that course, you had to go see an autopsy. That was a requirement. And what I found, what was more interesting than anything else, is that the best students who observed the autopsy was not men. It was women. Women did a better job. The guys were falling out and they were running left and right, you know, in this case here. So what I'm saying is it's all connected. With no if, no, although you're interested in homicide and she's forensic psychology, it's all connected with no if, no buts about it. And the other thing I want to say is that my colleague, Paris over there, I'm proud of him in more ways than anyone even knows, because his family was some of the early settlers in Glassboro. Black family that came to Glassboro. Him, in all wise, he comes from a family that has made contribution to the city of Glassboro, whether anyone knows that.
Any other questions from students? Please, yes. Your name and...
My name is Matthew Grant, and I would like to have a degree in law and political science. My question is that there's predictions, like statistics, that with current trends, let's say by 2050, the median income in a black household would be 0. For the Hispanic population, the same thing will happen by the 2070s. How do you think this will affect the next generation that will take up your positions?
Well, I'm not familiar with that. I could say, like, anyone that would have predicted my success wouldn't have imagined that I would have made it out to be anything, you know? Like, I've had relatives that sold drugs and problems. So the predictions really don't mean anything. Like, see, and I have 2 sons, right? And kid might not be happy about this, but I, you know, I'm just talking. No, what conversations I tell them. I promote them to be the best at everything. People will tell you that you can't succeed or won't succeed, or a staff might say, you know, Paris Pratt grew up in Camden. I remember I couldn't get a job at a gas station in Camden to pump gas on my summer breaks, right? Because my address said Red Camden. I remember I had friends that didn't look like me that couldn't come visit me, and they were like, oh, Paris live in Camden? Oh, no, well, we can't go there. So don't get confused or don't buy into what stats say or what some people might say, because each foundation, each family, each structure builds with you first. And then, obviously, thankfully for me, I found a mate where our goals are the same, so we get to build. Because to be honest, no one would have envisioned she would be where she is, right, statistically, or I am where I am statistically. So I really don't, you know, buy into that. Because sometimes that might be told to you to discourage you, or might be told to you to make people quit, or might be told to you to make you commit suicide, right? So we have to understand that, well, easy thing for me is, I think I have it pretty good now, right? So historically speaking, I'm sure my ancestors had it a lot worse, right? And just thinking about that. So if they can make it through what they make it through, this is easy. This is cake. I could do this on my head, you know? So don't buy into that, please.
The other response is, do not buy into it. The question I have to ask, the study you're talking about, who completed the study? Who paid for the study? You need to look at that, because studies can be, you know, they can go into areas in which the people who pay for want to say certain things, and you can be misled. So what I'm saying to you is that, you know, look at the study. Who paid for it? What's going on? And the study could be set up to be biased from the beginning. Like what Paris stated, you know, he said, you know, look at him today. He's making a contribution. He runs the Philadelphia office. You understand that? That's important, very important. And his wife, she steps up high in her office, okay?
Yeah, to add to that, and this goes into the program, you'll learn about the history of studies like that, you know, backings by that support legislation that impact communities. So don't be misled by predictions in that nature, because what it is definitely an ulterior motive behind it. You know, I don't know who wrote it, but whatever it is. And as you're talking about how do I think it'll affect my position, that's what I'm here for, to actually make a difference while I'm in this position and open the door for the person behind me. So I want to make sure that when I leave, when I got this position, I was the 6th, and they knew it, the 6th black person at DEA to have this position. I don't want us to be able to count anymore, you know. My husband, I can't remember him, but it was a big deal when he got promoted too. I want to live in a world where we're not counting Black people and women and things of that. It's just happening, and it's second nature. But we have to also acknowledge the history of when it wasn't happening.
So do we want to take maybe one more question? Yes.
My name is James. I'm hope to pursue law enforcement. So both of you are in DEA. You said that you also thought about being an FBI. I was just curious on what made you align to that path of that federal agency and how you established your connections to those agencies.
So for me, like I said, I was being exposed, and it was very much a cultural thing. The culture of FBI. It's very. I don't want to talk about the culture. My personality was more aligned with DEA, and my passions were more aligned with it. So the people that I was exposed to at the FBI, they had more of a aura of superiority when they came into a room. And I was more of a service of a community kind of feeling. Like if I go into a community, I don't want to scream, I'm DEA or I'm FBI, look at me, I'm big and bad or whatever. I'm more like, I am a public servant. I get paid off of your tax dollars, and I'm actually here because somebody committed a crime, for one, and two, I'm here to keep your community safe. And that's kind of like how my background and how I am as a person. So I'm not to say FBI is like that across the board, but the people I was exposed to, they had that very arrogance, and so it turned me off personally. And so then I was exposed to DEA people who were, very personable, salt of the earth kind of people, and I'm like, this is my tribe. Let me go over here, and then I was able to learn from them and be exposed to more stuff. So.
Well, I like that question only because, for me, when I was a bridge cop, I was being recruited by the Secret Service. So I thought, do I really want to stand there and potentially get shot for some guy or a girl I might not like? You know what I mean? And the answer was quickly no, right? So, and I applied to the FBI and I applied to the DEA. But going through the FBI application process, it was more structured. It was more like interviewing for a job. And then, do like this, yes sir, no sir. DEA was kind of jokingly, when I met a guy at the bridge, he asked me how long did I want to work at the bridge. And that was my job. And I was like, well, I want to get good at my job first. And he was like, what are you going to just stand here and hold the effing bridge up? And I was like, wow. You know what I mean? I thought to myself, I like this place. You know what I mean? So that energy was totally different. And they were really, DEA is specialized. We only do drugs. FBI do a lot of different stuff. So I figure if I'm going to be on the team, any agency federally, I think we're the best at it, as we should be. And like I say, it's only 20% that are really good, because the 20% are pushing the other 80 to get better, right? Because we're not just happy with showing up at the playoffs one season. We want to win championships, right? So that's how we're built. FBI be like, well, they'll put in, they'll work a lot with people, and they'll win. I love them. If there's a terrorist activity, some kid gets abducted, whatever the case may be, I'm calling my FBI friends. Anything drug related is DEA all day. But it was more just the aura, the personality, the charisma of DEA that kind of lured me. FBI is good, but it was more corporate. And, do you see me sitting at a desk for 8 hours? I just can't do it.
And I would say, try it if that's where you want to go.
Yeah, it's definitely a need for them.
You don't, this is not like your dad's era or whatever, grandfather's era, where you have to work a job for 30 years or whatever. You can move around. If you don't like something, you can take your skill set somewhere else. You are working for someone for a wage. Don't feel compelled to stay somewhere that doesn't fit well with you. I've worked for 5 federal agencies. I mean, I love DEA, but if somebody else sounds better, I might go there too. So it's
So we're running out of time. So I think Dr. Tillman and I, we're going to distribute a sign-up sheet, and that sign-up sheet is going to have, if you could put, I think, one column if you definitely are interested in getting a major, dual major or minor in Africana Studies, please put your name. And then if you're kind of undecided, you'd like to get more information, so you're in that kind of maybe column, you can put your name in that column too, and both Dr. Tillman and I will follow up with you. And then you also have the suggested sequence handout to kind of give you some more information. So we're going to distribute that now before we leave. And I want to thank all of our panelists. If we could give them a round of applause, please. And thank you guys for your undivided